Like that's what I respect about the Ivy League. We're like, you could pay us however much you want us to pay. Like, we're not coming down.
Those teams wants to be on the receiving end of a 75-0 loss. Like,
yeah, they have bigger
Harvard
fish to
doesn't
fry.
need that. Harvard has Harvard money. They don't need whatever piddly payout like Alabama will throw their way to show up and get whooped on. Like, leave that for like the Morehouse states of the world.
There you go. Man, I think that's it for Aaron Judge. Like, when you go back and look at the history of guys, like when Dave had that article, I was like, okay, let's look back. And you're like, oh my God, like this is not even like a possibility. It seems like the most likely outcome is you're already seeing it's going to be basically like, it looks like it's going to be a bidding war between the Giants and the Dodgers. It seems like that's where we're headed.
Which the Dodgers part of that is fascinating to me, that they'd be willing to move Mookie Betts to second base at 30 years old, a position he hasn't played regularly since he was in the minor leagues, to fit Judge on that roster. That's wild to me. But I do think the problem that the Yankees face is twofold. One is that they already made an offer that he rejected. Two is that and this is part of that, he's not going to take any discount clearly to stay there. Whatever contract they offer him needs to be in line, or at least in the same ballpark, no pun intended, as whatever he gets from anywhere else. Like, the Yankees are not going to get this simply by underbidding and being like, but you love being here.
No, you're going to have to match whatever the best offer from the Dodgers.
Either you match it or you come as close to it as he feels essentially comfortable as saying.
And you're the Yankees. What are we doing? Like, you're the Yankees. That shouldn't even be a question that you match or go a little bit over. Like, what are we doing?
But that is a question now, and I think it's because of the same reason that Cashman and Boone are coming back, which is this team really does not want to get itself into a place where it's just making big moves or making moves for the sake of making them. And I'm not saying that re-signing Aaron Judge is just doing something for the sake of doing something. It is something that I think the Yankees should do. Would be the smart move. Blah 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 blah, et cetera, et cetera. But this is not a team. They make splashes. Garrett Cole was a splash. Trading for Giancarlo Stanton was a splash. Like, all the moves they made at the deadline were splashes in one direction or another. But this is not a team that acts like the Yankees of old. And I think that a lot of the disconnect for Yankees fans right now, when they see the reports that Cashman and Boone are more likely than not coming back, is why this is not the Yankees I remember growing up with. Or, maybe that's less so the case for, kids in their 20s, but at the same time, like, older Yankees fans, like, this is not the team I grew up with. The team I grew up with was one that wanted to win at all costs and had an owner who would not tolerate mediocrity or finishing second best or letting a homegrown superstar player walk to another team for less money or whatever, for more, or whatever it happens to be, more money, I guess it would be. That's just not how the Yankees operate anymore. The Yankees at this point are far closer to a regular team in that regard. And that is, I think, a weird thing for Yankees fans to have to hold in their head, is this franchise that they were taught is special and the best and is historic, and everyone wants to be here. Everyone wants to play here. No one wants to leave. Like, it means something more if you succeed here. And Judge has very clearly succeeded here, with the exception of a championship. And I don't really, if you're a Yankees fan who holds them not winning a title on Aaron Judge, again, you are the worst part of your franchise and of your franchise's fan base. You are an awful person. But I don't know if they've really made that mental jump. If they've kind of understood that this is just another rich team at this point.
I don't know. Yankees fans are pretty down. Like, reading the tweets and reading the responses and checking out different blogs about it, I don't know. They felt there's a reason that there were $12 seats for the elimination game. I feel like Yankee fans are pretty down about where they are, and where, like, the Dodgers have replaced them. The Dodgers are what you're talking about there now. Like, that's who the Dodgers are.
And I think the other thing is that depending on how things go this offseason and in the future, the Mets are on that track too.
Yeah.
They have a rich owner.
But they're the Mets.
Really,
like, let's give it more in a couple of years. Like, there's still some crazy stuff. What are we doing? We know that there's some kind of crazy Cohen stuff that's going to pop up, and we're like, oh my God, is it already over? No, something crazy is going to happen.
Something crazy is always going to happen with Steve Cohen, and with the Mets generally.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. This is not the Yankees TM anymore. It's just the Yankees. They're just one of 30, and they happen to have more money than all but like 2 or 3 other teams in baseball at this point, if even they have less money than anybody. But the way they operate is now in line with the way that all these other major franchises operate, which is to say things like sustainability, cost effectiveness, value. Those all mean something more now than they did back in the day. So I mean, yeah, they are going to have a fight on their hands to keep Judge, I think, because we've already seen, like, if the Dodgers are already willing to say publicly, yeah, we're going to move the MVP that we traded for, who won us a title, to second base just to fit this guy in, that's not a good sign. The Giants have already come out and made their noise clear, and of course, Judge has the hometown connection there too as a Bay Area kid. That's not good. You can definitely count on the Mets just being in there to screw around, if nothing else. Like, how badly Steve Cohen would want Aaron Judge staying in New York, but on the Mets, just to just to put it in the Yankees' face and win the
I think
back
Judge
pages.
is it too dorky or naive for me to say? I think he's too classy to do it.
I think there probably would be some weird emotional thing with that would probably keep him from doing it. But at the very least, I can see the Mets being in there and making offers anyway, just to try to drive the price up. And there's always going to be the hashtag mystery team. There's always going to be at least one team coming out of nowhere to be like,
Texas Rangers.
I mean, look, it would not be the weirdest or worst decision on their part. In fact, it would line up pretty well with all the rest of the stuff they've been doing over the course of the last 2 months or so.
Mm-hmm.
Look,
but I mean, it's also weird with the Dodgers because they've never done this. Like, we talk about it, like, you traded for Mookie Betts. Freddie Freeman was kind of a deviation there a little bit, but by and large, Andrew Friedman has not been the guy to go out and make the big free agent signing. He's not doing the years.
Which also makes me think that Trey Turner is probably not sticking around.
Well, we predicted on the pod last week, Trey Turner for Dansby Swanson, a swap there. And you get Dansby and Freddie Freeman reunited. You can do that.
Yeah,
Mike Culberson can be the utility guy that he's always meant to be behind Dansby.
Like, if Dansby goes to LA, he'll have to hire Culberson to be his, like, body double so that he can just get around more easily.
He looks like LA though. Like, he fits in LA.
But yeah, I don't know. It's gonna be a weird offseason, I think, for the Yankees. The Judge stuff is, and I think part of the problem that they have is that the Judge stuff needs to be resolved sooner rather than later.
Well, that was my follow-up. Do you think this, because we talked about Bryce Harper and him sitting on the market for as long as he was, up until March, right? Like, is when he ultimately signed. Do you think that the possibility is just as strong that Judge is hanging out there in March?
Sure. I mean, he could certainly come out and put out a request for an offer, or put out numbers that every team looks at and goes, no, we'll see you in 2 months when you get your head right.
Yeah.
But I think the problem for the Yankees is, obviously, they're going to have to set some kind of internal deadline of, look, you either take this offer or you don't, but we have other shit we need to figure out.
Yeah.
And your contract is going to be the biggest part of that to figure out, because it is invariably going to be $300 million or more. Mm-hmm. And if the Yankees decide that's their big expenditure of the offseason, and I have a hard time seeing how they're going to fit more than one of those onto that team, given the unwillingness in years previous to do that, then if this process gets dragged out, they're eventually going to have to pivot to some other direction, whether that's Correa, whether that's Trey Turner, whether that's whoever it happens to be on the free agent market. They're going to have to go in that direction instead. Mm-hmm. But the other thing of it is like, and this is something in thinking about where the Yankees are and what their roster looks like, I don't really think the 2023 Yankees, with the potential exception of Judge, are going to look all that different from the 2022 Yankees. Like, the rotation isn't changing. It's Garrett Cole and Luis Severino and Nestor Cortez. You've got Frankie Montas for next year, assuming he stays healthy. Somewhere you find a fifth starter, but they've got 2 in-house candidates already in Domingo Germán and Clark Schmidt, plus whoever else is still kicking around the high minors. And also, they could also just reach out to get a cheaper veteran, like try to find their own Michael Wacha, for example, or try to find their own Kyle Gibson of sorts, who can just go out there, throw 5 useful innings and call it a day. Mm-hmm. You know, the lineup also not really changing. Anthony Rizzo is presumably going to opt out of the option he has to look for more money. I assume the Yankees are probably just going to give it to him, because it seems like both sides were pretty happy with what they had. But barring a trade of Gleyber Torres, barring the Yankees deciding that for whatever reason, Anthony Volpe and Jose Peraza are not the future in the middle infield, barring something bizarre. I mean, and Cashman's always good for a surprise move in either the offseason or the deadline. That's his thing. But there really aren't places, with the exception of third base, where I think the team is going to do everything in its power to dump Josh Donaldson on somebody and just be rid of that. And left field, where Aaron Hicks is very clearly not a reliable long-term solution, and it doesn't really seem like the team is willing to make Giancarlo Stanton a regular there, and understandably. It doesn't really feel like, I mean, if Harrison Bader is your center fielder, he's obviously not going to play left. Maybe it's Oswaldo Cabrera, maybe it's some mix of Cabrera and Hicks and other, but either way, like, there aren't a lot of open roster spots where you can kind of make a change. Again, unless you want to start flipping the guys who are already there. And that's certainly a possibility, but again, not the knee-jerk Yankees of the George Steinbrenner days.
Yeah.
This is not a team that's suddenly going to pop off and start doing wild stuff. Like, they punted the free agent market essentially in its entirety last offseason so that they could have room for either a Volpe or Peraza, or maybe both at this point, to be options for the 2023 team. It may have cost them a chance to win a World Series in Judge's final year. I don't think you can point to Isaiah Kiner-Falefa directly and say that's the reason the Yankees didn't win the ALCS and by extension the World Series, but he certainly didn't help them very much. And it's really easy to suggest that, hey, maybe Corey Seager or Carlos Correa would have been a little bit better in that spot instead. Maybe the team would have gotten a little further, or maybe not further, but maybe the team would have performed better. Maybe the odds of a championship were higher if they'd done that and just gotten the known good quantity instead of trying to find a cheap bridge to the potential future. I don't know, but it feels like a pretty safest guess to me. But either way, this is not a team that really makes their big splashes are fewer and further between now.
Yeah.
And I think if there is a big splash,